audience that has words of wisdom for us?
I don't know how much wisdom it is, but Pete Lampy, 808 Cedar Lane. We've all seen today that the work is starting to begin on Bremer Avenue. The barricades will be going up later this week, I'm assuming. That's what we're being told. I would request that all council people take a drive around Cedar Lane before the snow or after the snow's cleared off and take a look at the condition of Cedar Lane so that you'll have a good comparison after Bremer Avenue's work is done and see the deterioration that'll happen this summer. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. I think we've all been duly noted that it needs to have some work done on it. And,
Good evening. John Campbell, 1001 10th Avenue, Southwest, Waverly, Iowa. I'm here to ask today for the council to at least see if we can't come up with a reduction in the speed limit on 10th. You've got several reasons that I think justify it. One of them is, since I'm semi-retired and spend a lot more time on that road, I found that the popularity of turning into my drive is becoming greater. But we have a situation where you've got 4th Street southbound at 40 miles an hour until you get out to Norby's. You have less than, I believe it is, 250 feet, and you have a 45 mile an hour posted speed limit on 10th going west. With the proposal, which is your item number 1, whether that goes through or not tonight, I think that the speed increase 3 times on 10th since I lived there. It was originally 25 miles an hour for a 2-lane road. It then went to 35 miles an hour. It went to 45 miles an hour after that. Since then, you have had additional commercial properties with driveway allowances, and I think the amount of traffic is justified in setting the speed limit at a lower speed. I think that you'll find, if you want to contact our police department, you'll find that tickets are written on that road for speeding, but they're in excess of 55 miles an hour. So we know that there's times when people are driving 60 on what I consider to be a very heavily traveled road, and I would just like to have the support of the council in whatever direction needs to be taken to get that speed limit on the entire 10th. And I think you seriously need to look at it east of there, which I believe would be the Parkway, Cedar River Parkway, because I think that speed limit going down to the soccer complex with the use of the trail and the crossings now with residential streets there added in, that should seriously be looked at also. I thank you for your time.
very good. Thank you, John. Is that something that Chief Purcell and Mike would take a look at, or where does the study fall on?
We'll take care of it.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have something that they would like to speak about that's not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment section for this and go to item number H, the consent calendar, which is a pay request from McClure Engineering Company for the 20th Street Northwest reconstruction for 2018 for $14,360. Pay request from Bolin Recreation for the Rolling Hills Miracle Play equipment for $20,099.25. Pay request from Bergen KDV Technology and Consulting Incorporated for extreme switching ruckus wireless for $20,826, and setting the public hearing for May 7th, 2018 at 7 o'clock p.m. in the council chambers of City Hall to review the 20th Street Northwest reconstruction, namely railroad crossing improvements at 20th Street Northwest and 5th Avenue Northwest, 2018 project plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimated cost. Do I hear a motion?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any council discussion?
Just a question before we vote. It seems to me that normally the consent calendar consists of pay requests. I'm curious to know why the fourth item is part of the consent calendar. Am I just not paying attention? Do we occasionally have these?
I think we had a discussion where that was something that we could add to the consent calendar to speed up the pace of the meetings.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the cause? All those in favor of set consent calendar say yes.
Yes.
Those opposed? Consent calendar passed 7-0. Regular business item number I, approving third and final reading of ordinance 1033, an ordinance providing for rezoning property on the northwest corner of 4th Street Southwest and 10th Avenue Southwest from R1 single-family residential to C2 commercial district, with accompanying statement of commitments from applicant for amending the Waverly future land use map from residential to commercial. Is there a motion?
I would have moved approving the third and final reading of ordinance 1033, an ordinance providing for rezoning of property on the northwest corner of 4th Street Southwest and 10th Avenue Southwest from R1 single family to C2 commercial district, with accompanying statement of commitments from applicant for amending the Waverly future land use map from residential and commercial to commercial.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Before I ask for council discussion, there are representatives of Casey's here. And do you have a presentation that we would like to see?
I do, Mr. Mayor. I'll go get the microphone. You don't mind if I sit down, right? Be easier. And I apologize if you're seeing a repeat of sweater shirt combination because I don't know what I wore here before. Okay. There was a request to kind of review and re-show the video that we showed at Planning and Zoning, showing, I call it a berm because that's my engineering term about building a berm. It was brought to my attention that it's much larger than a berm. It is close to a 16 to 20 foot hill that we're creating, depending on where you measure it from. So if you would pay attention to the screen for just a moment, the first view that you see is kind of a bird's eye view, and we modeled each of the townhome units that are adjacent. Then the video takes us to the first patio level, which is that second level, where this is the view rendered on that closest unit, where they do not have line of sight of any of our structures. Then you move to the second unit. We do start catching a part of the car wash roof line. But again, you'll see there's a large hill. We're giving a view to the east and then to the south.
Are you showing what you, are we seeing what you,
on the screen.
yeah.
Okay.
We see a video, we see what looks like a video.
But it's not playing. Well, let's do this. I thought we had it working.
Change the resolution back to what it was.
I can do that. Let's look at, try duplicate.
Might not have it there. You try.
Second screen open. I can try and play it now.
Right, it's working out there.
That's okay, we can see it there.
Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize for the technical glitch. We tried to email it, the file was too big, and then brought it on my flash drive, and I think your antivirus hates my flash drive because it won't let me put the file on there, so I got to use my laptop, so I apologize for the technical glitch. So this is the view to the east from the closest unit, and then as we push play, then I can pause it. This is the view to the south, and you can see along in this area, this is where that hill that we're creating from the bottoms. This would be the view from the neighbors. Then as we continue to go, it'll jet set over to the next unit, and then that's that separation wall that we modeled, which then blocks their line of sight. So this would be their view. Again, east, then looking south. Now you can catch the roof line of the car wash that I mentioned. And again, please note, we modeled the trees as the size that they're going to be planted at that 6-foot height to give you scale of reference of what they'll see from day one. And then I think it's got one more unit to go to, which is the far unit. And then the other thing that I would like to point out is that in this, let me see if I can back it up. If I pause it here, the separation distance between the unit and our fence is 75 feet. That is the width of a residential lot. I also wanted to point out in the packet, I believe that we have a letter from the adjoining R1 landowner that is supporting this zoning. And then again, that we have restricted, I want to remind everyone, we have restricted in our proposal this green space that will stay perpetual green space on the west end of the property. The other thing is that we did discuss with staff. Bill, did you have the smaller versions of that, of the traffic? Both of them, actually, if I may borrow. You guys see this? Oh. Am I going to C?
There we go. Upside down though.
This is the,
Rotated 180 degrees, it's upside down for us.
okay. That works for me. Paper's much easier. This shows what we're proposing to do.
Zoom out.
Thank you. So what we're proposing to do for traffic alignment, as we're working through the process, is that we're proposing to do a median in this location, a raised median to create a turn lane, both for our facility and then to the residential driveway to the north. And I believe that's the Jansens, and then the residential home that stay there would share that driveway. This is the discussion that we had with city staff, and it coordinates with what's going to happen at the north end from the Snyder and Associates plan, which, let me flip that around, because this is 8th Avenue, 4th, where eventually it will become a 3-lane road to the north, which is slated for 2020, I believe. Mm-hmm. So it allows for traffic to get out of the way. We hope we address the concerns of people being rear-ended. It gives the Jansens a place to pull off where they don't have to worry about someone screaming to the north about being rear-ended as well. We've ran our digital models. Again, we did talk to the DOT. They have not raised any red flags for us yet, but they did ask that because they're under budget and understaffed right now, that unless this is a go, that they really don't want to review it until we give them the formal. They've done a precursory one, and no red flags have shown up. So we feel very confident that this would work. Again, we feel very confident that this would be approved by the DOT as it's presented today. And then I know I had a request for some night views, which I did happen to get. And this, I don't know if you can see it. It's kind of a shadowing. This is a black and white one. The crease is in there. What I think does a better view, and it's not as big of a picture, is this colored version that really identifies the foot candles, where you can see the green. So this is along that north edge. This is along the west edge. Here's 10th, here's 4th. And it shows that light is concentrated under the canopy. We have green lights, which is lower. Again, these are all the modern LED packages. If you've driven past Cedar Falls, there's that new Cedar Falls store on Green Hill that has this lighting package to it, where everything is downward directed, sharp cutoffs with the LED lights. With that, I think I've covered all the things that people asked for last time that we were here. If you would have any questions for me, I'd be happy to try and answer them. If not, then that is all I have for my presentation.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Wally.
Wally, I have a question about the lights. So when the store is closed, are the lights turned off, or how does that work?
Yes, when the store shuts down, the lights go out. Canopy lights, store lights. There remains, I believe, 3 security lights that are mounted on the building with sharp cutoffs.
And does the Casey sign stay lit up when the store is closed? Or
no, that turns off as well.
Okay.
And when is the store closed?
I believe this one is slated to be 6 to 11 or 5 to 11. 6 to 11. It's the 6 to 11 is hours of operation slated for this store.
Okay. Is there anyone in the audience that cares to speak to this before we get into council discussion? Yes, sir, Mr. Jansen.
This one?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. My name is Jim Jansen. My wife Carla and I live at 1020 4th Street Southwest. Returning to the council yet once again. Let me start with some thanks here. We've come several times with concerns about traffic flow in general and also specifically to our driveway. Casey's, perhaps Mike Cherry and his staff and the DOT, I think has really gone a long way to try to address that safety, particularly around our driveway area. So as an objective viewer would look at the plan, they see that there's safety for us both going north and south, because there's a pocket for us to sit in. There's a protected pocket for the people turning into Casey's. Mm-hmm. So it's clear that concerns have been aired and heard and addressed in this fashion. This is where it gets a little difficult for me, because I think with this solution, there's also some concerns that we still have, probably more so for the people of Waverly heading southbound, and now have 4th Street reduced from 2 lanes of traffic going south to really 1 lane. That was constructed as a 2-lane road 20 plus years ago. You and I have all seen the amount of traffic increase on that. So to project the yellow don't drive zone there, which I think really has the effect of 2 negatives that we see. It does really curtail the turning off of 8th Avenue for the condo owners. It makes that a little bit sharper and a little bit more restricted. But it also really restricts the traffic going south, particularly when you consider that some people going south will stop and slow down and turn into Casey's. We will be in that crowd as well as we are traveling to our driveway. But for me, it seems almost like the cure is worse than the disease. So we've taken 2 lanes of somewhat rapidly moving traffic. Now we've scrunched that down into 1 lane. I don't see the sense of that myself. It seems like that's just begging for a slower exit out of town for drivers that are used to 2 lanes of traffic. That's my concern. A remedy, certainly from our point of view, would be to eliminate the 4th Street exit into Casey's. And then you could really retain the nature and the flow that's on 4th Avenue right now, as I think we'd probably all say will only get increased as we move ahead in time. So my concern is reduction in the number of lanes for us and all southbound members of the Waverly community.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Patricia Shaw at 429 8th Avenue Southwest. I live in one of the condominiums. And if I may move this just a little bit.
Sure.
As Mr. Jansen said, some of the situation becomes worse.
Talk into the microphone, please.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Some of the situation becomes worse when we consider coming out of 8th Avenue Southwest right here. If you do this proposal, now you would block off the possibility of the condo owners coming out on that second right-hand lane going south. Do you see that? The yellow lines there where we would not be able to drive, we now come out into 1 lane instead of 2 right there. The other thing is this proposal allows no turning for those of us who come home into the condominium area. In other words, we're coming down the hill in the left-hand lane going north, and we still have to sit right there between those 2 little orange places while the rest of the traffic is coming behind us in order to turn left into the dead-end street, 8th Avenue Southwest. And therefore, for the condo owners, the residents who live back here, this is a worse proposal than leaving it like it was. So thank you. I hope you'll take that into consideration. I guess, from my opinion, it's not a very good solution for getting off of 4th Street Southwest if I were going north. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you.
Just a clarifying question. I mean, I know this is public comment time, but just to clarify, the crosshatched yellow area is a turning lane, is a blocked off lane. What is that?
Right now would be a blocked off lane. What we're doing is we're doing it to make it the way it will be in 2020 when 4th Street is a 30 lane, and there'll be a left turn lane instead of that hatch. So right now we can't put a left turn lane in there because we don't have enough room for that.
It's a painted median just like we have on 10th Avenue. So the existing 10th Avenue, as you come up to the intersection, you have a painted median that directs you into the appropriate lanes in the left turn lane. The proposal is to reconfigure that painted median on 10th Avenue to accommodate the access into Casey's off of 10th Avenue. Same thing with 4th Street. What you're seeing is a painted median, and this is it's compatible with the design for the reconstruction of 4th Street. I don't know.
Yeah, you know that. 4th Street.
So I'm really going to zoom in on the intersection with 8th Avenue up here. And again, this is just painted pavement markings that define the median and guides you through the into the appropriate lane. This is from, what do we say, Bill? It was 2013?
Yes.
The work that Snyder and Associates did for the 4th Street corridor and continuing with the 3-lane. And in order to create the left turn lanes from 8th Avenue going north, that outside lane gets shifted over and you effectively have one lane continuing to the south. So what is being proposed for Casey's, even if Casey's gets turned down, that will still be the proposal for the construction work in 2020, is to reconfigure this, carry one lane all the way up the hill, and about when you get to Jansen's driveway or a little bit past, that's when you widen out to the 2 southbound lanes, just as is being proposed with the Casey's configuration. What you also have, the benefit of doing that, is this project also involves some widening to the east over by the cemetery, which then allows that left turn lane to be carried all the way to the 8th Avenue intersection, so that you truly now do have that left turn lane to be able to turn towards the condos. You don't have that immediately with the Casey's project because we're not widening to the east by the cemetery, and we can't do that right now because of the need to have these turn lanes match up on the north and south sides of the 8th Avenue intersection. So what's being proposed for the Casey's project is very much in line with the future improvements that are proposed to be done as part of the 4th Street reconstruction project in 2020.
Thank you, and I apologize. I didn't want to take away from the public comment time, but I thought it was relevant.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Mike. Any other comments from the public on this project? Hearing none. Council discussion.
We just kind of pick on that. I would note that it looks like the painting is all in the southbound 2 lanes of 4th Street there, so it doesn't really change the situation as it is today for folks coming north and wanting to turn on to 8th Avenue.
Yeah.
Not that that's a good situation, but it doesn't really change how it's configured currently.
Well, I suppose I'm going to come out and say that when I first heard of this plan, for Casey's to put a gas station here, it made a whole lot of sense to me. You basically have 2, what do we call these things, arterial roads. We're going to be creating a bypass 10th Avenue, Cedar Parkway, so you're going to have a lot more traffic going down that way. I thought it made a whole lot of sense. I mean, from Casey's point of view, it seems like this is a good place to build a gas station. There's just a lot of traffic, and if we have traffic trying to bypass Waverly along that 10th and Cedar Parkway, it would be nice that if they wanted to stop for gas, they'd have an opportunity to do so. Lots of people have talked about noise concerns. I believe that with what Casey's is doing with the berm and the wall, it'll actually improve the amount of noise. That's actually a pretty busy intersection. There's lots of cars going through there now. And I think that what Casey's doing is probably going to improve the amount of noise that we're hearing from there. There's concerns about light pollution, but I think that, again, they've addressed those. They're using kind of newer types of LED lights that should project all of that light down. You're not going to have any direct light shining into those houses. There's probably going to be reflected light, but I don't think that's a significant problem. There's questions of water runoff. So both normal rain runoff, because you're going to have a parking lot there, but I think they've addressed the water runoff, kind of getting that, controlling the water runoff so it's only released as a rate of kind of equivalent to a 5-year downpour. They've addressed concerns of fuel runoff. So dripped fuel, they've got their fuel filters in place. They can be cleaned, they can be replaced. I think they've addressed that concern. The big one is traffic. There certainly are concerns about the traffic there. There's going to be an increase in congestion, people coming in, coming out. But I think traffic problems solutions exist for that. We are not the only town in the United States that have traffic problems, and we can look to solutions and solve those. So while there's lots of concerns about traffic, I mean, after the 2020 improvement along this street, we're going to have to redesign those lights anyway, and I think any traffic problems that show up between now and then can be addressed. I know there's concerns about having a commercial zone so close to a residential zone. But anytime that we have commercial zone and residential zones touching, we kind of make choices about the type of commercial and the type of residential. And the type of residential that we often have adjoining a commercial zone is going to be this kind of multifamily housing, like the condos we have here. While I'm sympathetic to the people who have those houses first, that's exactly the type of housing that we would have adjoining a commercial zone. And I want to say that Casey's has really bent over backwards to accommodate our concerns. They are definitely a good player. And I think we should reward that. I think we want to encourage responsible investment in our community. I think that's definitely what they're doing. If we put that off and say maybe we should just put a commercial 1 development in there, we have no control over who else might be coming in here in the future. And while a gas station sounds like a doomsday device, I think that Casey's has done pretty well to mitigate any problems and any concerns that we can foresee. So that's kind of my 2 cents, and I'm kind of in support of the rezoning.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Any other comments around the?
I can go next, I guess. I know this has been a very stressful process for the neighbors and for others, and I appreciate the respectful manner in which everyone involved has conducted themselves. I think that sets a really good example for how issues can be discussed in general in Waverly, so I appreciate that. I think we've had a lot of productive dialogue, and I'm going to be a little redundant with what Brian said, I guess. I had some major concerns coming in. I was concerned about noise. I do think that Casey's has addressed a lot of that by limiting loudspeakers, limiting the dryer noise from the car wash, et cetera. I also had concerns about water runoff, but I think that has also been addressed. The use of the directional lighting. Now we know that the lights aren't going to be on when Casey's is closed. I find that helpful. I was also concerned about the line of sight issues for the condo residents especially. I think the video was very helpful in eliminating my concerns about that. Traffic, a lot of people have concerns about that whole stretch of road. I think it's going to take us a couple of years to solve all those problems, but I'm impressed with how much work everyone has put into it. And I think I'm also reassured that there will be a second level of oversight once and if the project is approved. That'll occur further along in the construction process. I'm not a traffic engineer, so I have respect for people who do that and their expertise, and I think that from the get-go, what I've seen from everyone is a focus on safety here, safety first, and I appreciate that. There's also been mention, as Brian said, of putting a C1 property there. I agree with what Brian said. I think that Casey's has attempted to be a very good neighbor. And I also am concerned that if a C1 property went in, they can build up to, I believe it's 15 feet from the adjacent property. And here we have a cushion of 75 feet. And we also have a potential property owner who is obviously very invested in coming to Waverly, has been very responsive, and I think we need to, as Brian said, reward that. So all things considered, I don't have a compelling reason to oppose the rezoning at this point.
I guess maybe we'll go in order of seniority here, right? All the newbies are going first, but I'm going to go under the assumption that all of my colleagues on the council have already decided how they're going to vote on this issue. But I want to make my thoughts clear for the record and for the people of Waverly and for my colleagues here on the council. I just have 3 comments I'd like to make, and I'll try to make sure that they stay relatively brief. Something that Ms. Costello said at our last meeting got me to thinking, and she said what we have a responsibility to do as a council is to zone to the highest and best use. And that responsibility doesn't necessarily mean that we want to determine whether we want to have a Casey's at that location, or if the screening is adequate, or if the DOT has an acceptable traffic plan. Those are all really not decisions that we're making here. Our decision is what are the factors, make a decision on what is the highest and best use for that property. I think all of us would agree that the current R1 zoning is not the highest and best use for that property. It's not a zoning classification that we certainly would have voted if we were doing this from scratch. But that does not follow from that commercial development is always the highest and best use of a piece of property. So we need to put on our visioning glasses, take a look to the future, and try to decide what's best for the city of Waverly. Not necessarily for the residents who live there, not necessarily for Casey's, but what's best for the city of Waverly. And when I look at all the factors put together, the traffic issues, the character of the surrounding properties, because if you're standing there and you look around, what do you see? You see the condos, golf course, the church, the cemetery, and the only commercial property that's close is a low-density office development that's going in across the corner. So this is not a highly developed commercial area. I think we have to take into account the effects that this would have on the remaining residences, the people that are still living in the area, and the lack of urgency for the need for additional C2 development property in Waverly. My conclusion is that the highest and best commercial use for this area would be a low-density office or commercial development with limited hours and a low traffic impact. In other words, a C1 area. So that is what I would support, and I'm not going to support this, the rezoning proposal. The second point I wanted to make is it's been mentioned that we should take this opportunity because Casey's has promised to provide screening between their development and the adjoining residential areas. To me, adequate screening should always be required when we're having a change in the zoning code where commercial development is butting up against residential property. That should be in the code. I know that we've done some work on that in the last few years, but that has to be strengthened. Because whenever you have commercial property that's moving into a residential area, it's on the burden of the commercial property owner to make sure that there's adequate screening, and the city needs to enforce that. So even though I appreciate all of the offers that Casey's has made, that is the least that they should be doing. They should be doing that anyway. And then lastly, even if you disagree with everything that I've said so far, I want to make one last point. If we go ahead with this rezoning tonight, that's done. We can't go back. We've done it. Whatever happens, we're going to have to live with. If we decide not to rezone, and we decide a couple years from now that we made a mistake and that that property should be rezoned C2 because the traffic issues have been dealt with, we know what kind of traffic flow we have. We've rebuilt 4th Street and we know what the traffic is on 4th Street after it's been reconstructed, and we decided that really would be a much better spot for C2 property. We can always go back and change that. We can rezone it. But once we made the decision to rezone that, we're done. bar the door, that's it. So I would err on the side of caution at this point, because there are so many things that we don't know. I'd rather wait until we had some of those things a little bit more in hand before we went ahead and approved the project. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
Yes, I kind of would echo some of what Rod has said. I've already talked a little bit about this. The traffic plan, to me, is still the safety issue is the key, and the one factor that doesn't seem to jump out when you're looking at a satellite imagery of this is the grade. That is on a hill. That is 4th Street at that point, north of 10th Avenue, Cedar River Parkway, is a hill, and it's not a shallow hill either. It's a fairly steep hill going down. And the concerns I've seen over the years driving that I've lived here on that stretch anyways, without any turn lanes, without anything, people sliding and going into the Burger King corner, people sliding through that intersection, cars trying to come south and car trying to turn onto 8th Avenue, and other cars stacked up behind it going south. To me at this point, there are safety concerns that need to be addressed, as Rod said, that I think we need to have addressed before we try to put another development in there that will add to it. And it's just, that's my biggest concern with this. I do agree that Casey's has done a lot to try to mitigate the concerns that neighbors have for it. But at the same time, the thought comes into my mind, why should they have to make all of these concessions? At a certain point, how many concessions have to be made before you say, wait a minute, how many different things are we bending over backwards to try to move out of the way when they could have just been, these wouldn't have been problems somewhere else maybe. If you have to make so many exceptions to the rule, I guess I'm not sure that it makes sense.
Okay.
I always get irritated when other people take all my talking points. And Tim took a few, but Rod took most of them. I have real concerns about the neighbors' concerns. My real concern is about traffic, both on 8th and on, 8th, but 4th and 10th. I had a conversation with some of the folks who live in the condos, and one gentleman out there who knows quite a bit about highway maintenance, because that's been what he does for a living, said to me, if you think we are going to have a problem coming up that hill going south on 4th, when traffic conditions are optimal, where you have snow there, and people are actually sliding on the hill because sometimes they do, and then you want to go in and out of the gas station. That sounds to me to be a really bad situation. The situation on 10th, I really don't think we know where we're going to be with that, because we haven't finished the parkway, and I really think what we're going to see is a lot of trucks going through there. We have people who are concerned about the traffic patterns in there now at rush hour. I haven't deliberately spent a lot of time on that intersection at rush hour time, because when you're retired, you can pick your times to drive places. So I don't really have to do that. But the stories I hear from people are that the backups are considerable, and it's a real caution. I also want to say that I have high regard for Casey's, and I would like to see Casey's build a second station. It would seem to me that with this new parkway, there will be other places to put it. I can't get anybody to tell me where else they might consider it. If I were wanting that property, I wouldn't tell you I had some alternatives, because that would weaken my argument. But I really think that there may be some other places that would be more sensible to put it. All things considered, I can't support this basically because of the traffic issues and the safety concerns, which I think should be paramount, really.
jump in and keep going around the circle here. This is really, I think, unique when I look back on other zoning requests that come to the council. Normally, we get asked to just approve the zoning. There may be a developer that has an idea what they want to do there, but I'm saying this a little cautious because I don't think the council needs to get this involved in every project that comes forward. But to Tim's comment, concessions, I don't look at it that. I think other projects that have come forward have had the same hurdles to go over, but they're done working with city staff out of our preview. So as I look at this, again, being a process person, I think the process is done very well. It's cumbersome. You have to come back many times. You have to share through emails, but this is a big change. It shouldn't be easy. So it's already been alluded to. I think the folks that have been involved in this have been very professional, supportive, those type of things. So again, I would like to compliment that, and it'd be nice if all the interactions went that way. But as I look at it, it's kind of hard to put the genie back in the bottle now that we know what the project is. So if this was just coming forward as a straight rezoning without knowing what the project was, yeah, I would agree with most of you that a C2 just doesn't fit. But now that we know what's going there, what the project is willing to do to make it fit within the neighborhood, I think we have to give that due consideration. And being somebody that travels past a competitor on a daily basis, yeah, traffic is an issue on the east side of town for an hour or two in the morning, maybe for an hour over the lunch hour, and then maybe for an hour or so as folks are coming home. This isn't going to be continual traffic turning in and out of here. There's certainly peaks, but for the most part, I see it functioning much like a low-density doctor's office, those type of things, outside of maybe those couple of real peak times. The fact that we're throttling down 4th Street going south for another block or so, to me, isn't a bad thing. How you provide safety is to have things that slow traffic, either with mediums, with the paintings, those type of things. So slowing traffic till they get past the 10th Parkway intersection, to me, is not a bad thing. If that's going to back people up to Main Street, we've got a bigger problem. If it's just another half a block, 3/4 of a block before they can span out and go, those type of things. So what this comes down to is I've worked with a couple of folks east of town when a developer wanted to do something a lot right across from the DOT shed. What he had envisioned there, the group didn't think it fit with their neighborhood, so they resisted the rezoning. It didn't go through. And now if you go out and talk to a few of them, what got built there that fit within the zoning that was there is worse than what they envisioned under the rezoning. The developer there was brought forward a letter of commitment that says, these are the things I'll do to address the concerns, similar to what Casey has done. So as I boil this all down, I'm getting kind of long-winded here, is to me, I think the project can work there, will work there. To me, we have a window into this project that we don't normally get. I think we need to be conscious of that. And my bottom line is I'm concerned if we don't, what could happen? I would rather, now that the process has played itself out, most, if not all, of the concerns have been met at some degree by the residents around there. I would feel much more comfortable going home tonight, voting in favor of this, knowing what they're going to get versus voting against it and not knowing what's going to happen there. I'll stop there, I guess.
You have
Yep.
some words of wisdom?
Well, I don't know if it's words of wisdom. I'll say a few words.
Okay.
This has been, I guess I'd like to say, for me at least, this has not been a decision. I've not made a decision coming into this, by no means. As a matter of fact, it's been a very difficult decision-making process for me, and I guess I will say until we actually vote, I feel like I'm still in that process. But I do know what some key points for me have been that I've deliberated about and spoken with people about. I've tried to be respectful, I hope I have been, of the various entities and individuals who are part of this process. And I guess maybe influenced by, and hopefully not inappropriately so, my years on planning and zoning. I tried to take all the players out of it initially, I suppose in a little bit like in the way that Rod did. And the first place I go for that is the comprehensive land use plan. I know that planning and zoning, the individuals on there and the body as a whole takes a lot of time and effort and care in developing that. And it is the future vision in terms of planning for the city. If we look at that, it does have commercial in this area that we're talking about. The Planning and Zoning Commission, I'm going to come back to their vote because nobody's mentioned that, was a majority vote, only one opposing vote to the purely, again, now they had some cases information too, but they voted to put forward to us a recommendation to approve this rezoning. I've met with many neighbors. I've also met with other citizens and received emails who don't live in the neighborhood. And it's somewhat mixed. Certainly most of the neighbors are opposed to it. I understand that from talking, I think, with most of you. And I think, if I'm reading things right, one of the things you're calling on us to do is to question the comprehensive land use decision, which we as a body should. It's a recommendation to us as a council. And we do have to look at that critically, take it seriously and respect it, but also look at it critically when necessary. And this is one of those situations where it really demands, I think, us to do that, because it's such a muddy situation in that part of town in terms of what's all there and what will it be in the future. It's just so gray. And I think that what some of the neighbors there are hoping is that we would act to keep this R1 by not voting for the rezoning. When I think about that, both in terms of the comprehensive land use plan and the Planning and Zoning Commission's decision for a recommendation, and I think about the future of Waverly, even though that's a gray area, I just don't think that's going to stay R1. I just have a hard time imagining how that will stay R1 there. And so if my projection on that is right, then what is the best for Waverly and for the neighbors in the future for that particular part of Waverly? And I guess I would say, I'm going to repeat, hopefully not too much, but a little bit what some others have said, but I think I'm coming at it from a little bit of a different angle, and that is we do know what Casey's has said, which is unusual. We normally don't have this much information going into a rezoning decision. And I guess I think for the future of Waverly and for the neighbors there, I'm right now leaning towards saying that I think the Casey's option would be the best one. The rezoning would be the best because of what we know. There will be perpetual green space to the west with views that the neighbors have of largely a hill with nice trees. I haven't had, as you know from my comments before, as many concerns about traffic as some others have. I think those are solvable problems. I'm certainly concerned about safety, but I think those are solvable problems, and I think we've seen a real movement in that direction already. Some of the other key concerns about the noise from the car wash have been addressed. the directional lighting, LED lighting, limiting the noise, the speakers outside, the water runoff underground. I don't know how many of you follow water runoff and what happens in the city in general, but to have that underground is very unusual and a huge benefit to that whole area around there. To have, I guess, what's been called a berm, but basically a 16-foot hill with 6-foot Norwegian spruce on top as a site barrier. All of this, comes together for me. It's not an easy decision, and it's not black and white, but I think we have a commitment that, as I understand it, that signed commitment agreement goes with the zoning, not just Casey's, so that if anything were to change down the road, which from the history of Casey's, as I understand it, isn't likely, that they will be there and be committed to that for a very long time, that they don't have a lot of turnover. But if that were the case, that it would have to come back for rezoning again, because the commitment goes with the rezoning, not with the property owner. So all of that, I guess, and maybe I've been too long-winded, but I do want to, I hope I've been able to express that it's not been an easy decision for me, but that's where I am right now.
Okay, very good. Thank you to all of you. Is there any other comment, question? Roll call vote, please.
Drinkow.
No.
Kangas.
No.
Kenzie.
Yes.
Rothy.
Yes.
Scherer.
No.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Resolution passed 4-3. We thank to everyone that in attendance. Thanks to Casey's and their efforts. We'll look forward to working with you on the site plan and go from there. Have a good trip back to Ankeny and Des Moines, and again, appreciate all of the extra work that you've put in on this very much. So. Okay, item number 2 has been pulled. Item 3, approving resolution 1858, approving a farm lease agreement between the City of Waverly and Dean Knapp for 35.34 acres parcel M property, and David Yoakum for 54 acres parcel N property located at Champions Ridge. I would entertain a motion, please.
Move approval of Resolution 1858, approving a farm lease agreement between the City of Waverly and Dean Knapp for 35.34 acres parcel M property for $10,124.91, and David Yoakum for 54 acres parcel N property located at Champions Ridge for the total amount of $9,720, payable in 2 increments.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Council discussion. I think it's just basically continuing leases on the existing properties. So.
Yes, sir. The existing lease with David Yoakum was not terminated when the transfer occurred, so we're allowing that to continue forward. And then the Fair Association took bids somewhat to get the individual renting their property. So this was their recommendation to us to do that. We're continuing with the other lease. So as stated, you see the amounts, the dollars, and we're just getting this underway for the planting season.
Okay, very good. Yeah,
there's always language in there that says if Champions Ridge goes forward, there's ways to buy out the farm ground.
Right.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Other questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Rothy.
Yes.
Scherer.
Yes.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Drinkow.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
Motion carried. Resolution carried 7-0. Item number 4, resolution approving a contract with Amperage Marketing for a community branding plan. I would entertain a motion.
I'll move Resolution 1859, approving a contract with Amperage Marketing for a community branding plan for an estimated amount of $39,325, plus out-of-pocket expenses for travel, meals, etc.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Bill, if you would present to council and public with the details.
The Economic Development Commission has been considering over the last year with ways that we could help the city fill more job openings. We have a lot of empty positions in different businesses in our community, and we're struggling to find those skilled and highly skilled workers that would want to come here and make Waverly their home. We've found that people are having to really recruit those kind of people and really make a consistent effort. And we didn't really have the type of materials that we felt we could move forward with to do that kind of advertising or that kind of recruitment. We're doing other things other than going for some materials, but we thought that it was time that we maybe look for some experts to come help us on how our community is perceived, what our positives are, maybe even knowing what our negatives are so that we can minimize those, figuring out ways to market ourselves, to brand ourselves as a community that is a good place for highly skilled workers to come work. So we've kind of gone back and forth, and I think we really responded to those industry persons on our Economic Development Commission because they were ones that thought this would be helpful to them, that we can help them recruit. We think it'll go across a number of different industries and businesses. We've already done one interview with a prospective engineer, I think it was in town, and Connie and Travis toured that person around town, and that person has now made the choice to take the position in town and be here. So we think, and we have another one lined up this week too, just to be quite honest with it. So we're trying a number of ways to help our employers do what we think, what we all know, that what a great community is and how we can show that community to others. One of the things that was recommended to us by some of our partners on the Economic Development Commission, which is Wartburg and Hospital, was that they had worked with a firm, Amperage Marketing, to do this kind of thing for their businesses, for the college and for the hospital. They're very pleased with how that helped them either recruit students or recruit workers to their, or patients to their facility, and felt that this would be a good fit for us. The other thing we thought about was the idea of using this kind of a firm to help us prepare for our community strategic planning that's coming up. One of the things that you do when you get into those kinds of places is everybody has the preconceived notion of what people think of us, what we think of our own community. And we felt like maybe we ought to be talking to the people who don't show up and volunteer to participate in those types of things, that aren't going to be showing up to spend their time in that strategic planning session that tends to be all of us that do it all the time. And so we kind of get that tunnel vision. So what we thought was we could use Amperage to help us do surveying and studies that will help us find out what others perceive about us, what's good about us, what can we market to others. And so that kind of, then I've had a couple of conversations with the people at Amperage and talked to them about what our concerns were. They listened very nicely to me talk on and ramble on. And I think that was kind of a way for them to understand what our concerns were at the commission level. What they put together is a proposal that basically is to find out what others are thinking of us and what we think, what we should be showing them or what we should be putting out there to entice either workers, business development, industrial development, anything, to really brand ourselves. We noticed that in the commission level, we talked about how people view Waverly, and what they always seem to say is, "Oh, that's a nice place." You know, it was kind of this generic. It's a great place. It's a nice place, but they're not sure why, or they're not sure what makes that happen. And so we thought there would be some opportunity for a way to kind of articulate that to people in a way that people will say, now we know why they're good. They have these things, or they have this kind of community. So I'm going to let the ladies from Amperage come up and maybe answer some questions for you. We did try to take from their proposal some of the things that we put in the agenda memo, and I think I'd just like to have them come up and introduce themselves. These are the people we'll be working with if we decide to approve this contract, and I think they've sat through an hour and 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Getting a sense for what Waverly is, huh?
Thanks for having us this evening. My name is Robin Frost. I'm an account manager with Amperage Marketing and Fundraising. And if you were to proceed with this project, I would serve as your primary contact person and sort of a liaison between the city and the Economic Development Committee and Amperage to make sure that the projects are being completed to your satisfaction. So I'll let Erin introduce herself.
I'm Erin Bishop, and I'm the Research Strategist and Marketing Director at Amperage. So if you were to proceed with this project, my primary role would be facilitating the research projects, pulling in members of our other internal marketing and strategy team to help pull together what that brand vision is, the brand platform, and flesh out the messaging for we now know all of these things are what make Waverly so great, but how do we talk about that is part of what my role will be in the project.
This is basically a 23, 24-week process.
It is. The research phases would happen at the beginning, so we could have that phase done by the time the strategic planning process begins. So you'll have that information in your pocket when you go into the strategic planning process. So you'll come armed with lots of information for that. And then we would roll into the brand platform and messaging afterwards.
Okay.
Well, I don't know whether branding would work for Waverly the way it seems to have worked for Wartburg College. Everybody seems to know the slogans at Wartburg. But I am reminded of a study that was done a few years ago in which a research group went out to a number of churches, and they asked questions of two groups. They asked members of the church, do you perceive yourselves to be a friendly community? Everybody thought they really were, obviously. And then they asked people who had had contact with the congregation but weren't members and had been there for some reason, and asked them. In many cases they said, oh, that is the coldest place. I'm never going back there. Which makes me wonder where the disconnect is on that. And if you do this for the city, do you intend to do something on that touches people outside of the city so that you get the perceptions not just from people who are here, which may not be altogether accurate?
We would do a little bit of both. So the first part of it would be focusing a lot on I would say the people that always show up, as Bill said, those people, the key stakeholders in the community, your business leaders in community, the key community volunteers, those people who are really, really ingrained in the community and know what's going on and are really your voice for the community. That would be part of it. The second part of it would be the general consumer perception study, which would not only survey those living within the immediate city limits, but we would draw from a 30-mile radius around the heart of Waverly. That's not going so far out of the comfort or out of the geography that they're like, Waverly, I've never heard of that. I can't really tell you much about that. But it would pull from some of the fringe, smaller communities from around the area that would have probably a little bit different of a perception than those who live in the city limits would. Those are also probably a lot of people who are living in those smaller communities but commuting maybe to Waterloo and Cedar Falls to work or to other larger cities. So their input and perspective would be extremely valuable in not only coming up with a brand and messaging that can be lived by everyone who lives within the city limits, but also one that is bought into by those who don't live in the city.
I know in the Economic Development Commission, we talk quite a bit about the upfront cost. I think we need to be conscious of that, but there's also, we don't want it to be something we put on the shelf and don't use, and to use it, we're going to have to continue to invest in it. So I don't know if you can answer this question, but in other communities, other organizations you work with, how long does it take for whatever you produce to root itself and become the message of that community? Is that instantaneous, a 2-3 year process? What's the care and feeding of it, I guess?
I would say it's not instantaneous, but it can be sped up as fast as we're willing to put the effort in to speed it up, if that makes sense. It's probably going to take a good year to gain some traction. When you first announce it, there's a lot of getting used to it and buying into it, and then that needs to be fostered into, okay, what's this mean? And what's this mean for me? What's this mean for the community? And there's got to be continual feeding of it to the community in order to get that fully bought in. How quickly you feed it and how much you feed it is what depends on what that time frame looks like, if that makes sense. And some previous work we've done in other communities, they've really wrapped their arms around it and pushed it out there. And within a year, their messaging is everywhere. It's been embraced by their Chamber of Commerce, their Economic Development Organization, their city. It's been used very successfully in several workforce development initiatives. They were willing to put the boots on the ground and move that forward quickly, and it gained traction very quickly.
Thank you.
One of the things I'll point out is that the first proposal also had a marketing proposal, and we felt like we could talk about the marketing proposal in terms of the budgeting for next year, in terms of our process this fall, and that it was not fair to commit a small amount and then not have enough to really do it right. So if we get to that point in our strategic planning that we have what we want to really run with and we have some ideas on how to run with it, then we can talk about what we want to invest in it in the future years, in the coming years. And that would be a pretty good timing if we did a fall strategic planning process and then moved to budget and talked about whether we wanted to commit some funds towards that marketing aspect of it. Everything would be in place to do that.
Can you say what other communities you've worked with that might be relevant to us?
Absolutely. Probably the most recent and somewhat comparable, though they have a little bit more of a tourism spin on things, is our work in Mitchell, South Dakota. We've done a lot of work with them over the past few years. A complete community branding initiative. They were having one of the same problems that you're facing here in Waverly, and is really recruiting those skilled trades to the area. Mitchell, South Dakota is seen as home of the Corn Palace, and they were really having a hard time getting over that hump. How do we get seen as more than just the Corn Palace? How do we recruit people to live here? How do we fill our jobs? But they didn't have a single message that they were looking to communicate. They didn't have a single message that they were communicating to the community or to those external partners that were helping, feed those jobs for their skilled trades, such as community colleges that might be helping recruit those workers and those sorts of things as well. As housing, there was just, everybody was communicating a different message and everyone was hearing a different thing, and there was no consistency and there was no overall buy-in in who Mitchell was as a community. So we led them through a similar process that really rebranded their community as a whole. And that is when I was referencing before that it's been 3 or 4 years now. And there have been several things that have happened in those 3 or 4 years, but if you would drive into the city, you would know that their branding line is outside expectations, because that is everywhere and it's being communicated by everyone.
Just a couple of comments here. When I saw this on the agenda, I was a little skeptical at first, frankly, because branding is such a buzzword, and I wasn't sure that branding is what we really needed here in Waverly. it works very well for an institution like Wartburg, but I'm not sure that branding is really appropriate for what we're doing here. However, as I was listening to the discussion tonight, some of the things that were talked about particularly identifying the things that make Waverly a good place to live and having those in readily available for business and industry people, I think is really important. I know there are some situations where in my business we certainly could have used that very, very nicely. One of the issues that I think we have seen in the past, though, and Dan alluded to it, is that we have a tendency to do a lot of studies and spend a lot of money on studies, and they're approved by this council and they get put up on a shelf and are hardly ever looked at again. And nothing is going to happen unless there's an organization that's actually behind this and pushing it to make sure that, that the updates are done, that everybody buys into it, that the training is done, that the materials are done, that we continue this process. Is that going to be the Economic Development Commission? Is that going to be the chamber? Is that expected to be city staff? Who's actually going to get behind and push this thing out?
What we're expecting is that the Economic Development Commission will give us some feedback and some push from that body, but that it would be a chamber economic development staff-driven type of thing. Yep.
And I assume that the Amperage would probably make sure that we stayed on track to not drop the ball and did all the follow-ups and all of that kind of thing that we're supposed to do.
Yes, that would be Robin's job.
Hi, Robin, by the way.
One of the things that somebody said at the Economic Development Commission is that we do need to be prepared to make a commitment to do some marketing.
Not just the money, but
years.
everything else too.
Right.
Exactly.
But the money especially, because marketing a lot of times takes the money.
Yeah.
And that's what really need to understand that. I think that's why we said, let's get this strategic planning and talk about what we could do. And hopefully we'll have some proposals about what they can move forward with later in the year for that same reason when it comes to looking at the budget time.
And I don't know if your work with Mitchell, South Dakota, you discovered the fact that my father grew up in Mitchell, South Dakota. I don't imagine that was put in any of their material.
It was not.
Oh, well, you missed an opportunity there.
Once you get more famous, Rod, then it'll be in there.
Well, and George McGovern, by the way.
And George McGovern, that's exactly right.
To Rod's point, the Economic Development Commission did talk quite at length where would the management of this live. I mean, you look at the college, you look at the hospital, they've got PR organizations that do those type of things. Right. So as Bill indicated, I think there's commitment that since the chamber doesn't have a PR person, the city doesn't have a PR person, it has to be a joint effort. Everybody has to take ownership in it, and as we're doing now, take their piece of it to keep pushing it forward, that type of thing. And the last thing I'll kind of, from the Economic Development Commission, I was surprised as the talk went around the table, the employers have really changed the way they approach hiring. It used to be, here's my wage, here's what you can do for me, I'm a great place to work. That just doesn't work anymore for them. They said you really have to sell them on the community to get them to be interested in the job, because they can go to any community and get exactly the same job. So I think this does dovetail very solidly into what we've been trying to do from economic development. Is we've got good employers, they've got good jobs, they've got good wages. Now we just have to convince people Waverly's a good place so they'll come and take those jobs. To me, this is a logical step in that process.
Well, I was under the impression that Travis Tolliver was our PR person, but I don't know. I mean, he certainly makes a good voice for the city. Since we were talking about Mitchell, after 4 years, do you know, have they been able to measure results from their branding? Has something changed that they didn't know about before, didn't accomplish before?
That is something that's next on the list. We did a pre-consumer perception study, much like we're proposing here. Something that's next on the list but has not been completed yet for them is to go back and do a post-study of sorts to gauge how far the needle has moved on those perceptions. So I don't have an answer for you today, but hopefully will.
I'm just assuming that if we do brand Waverly, it wouldn't be Waverly is not just for Germans anymore.
We would not recommend that, no.
So in the materials that you've shared with us, I very much appreciate where you've listed the measures, both for Mitchell and for the other project you did. What do you identify as being the measures that you would use in Waverly? I mean, sure. Educator, assessment is very important. How do you know that you're actually having an impact? What do you see as the thing that we would be measuring for Waverly?
For Waverly, we'd be working very closely with all of you to determine what those benchmarks would be. So should this roll into a marketing plan, which would go into, we have this message, how do we push it out now? Where do we communicate this message? The specific target markets that we want to communicate to will come out as a part of this initial process that we're proposing here tonight. And then the next phase of that is to determine where does this get pushed out. We know that we have several different audiences here. Where is the hierarchy of those audiences? And then what are those specific measurable objectives that we want to achieve and that we're working towards?
So we'd be measuring kind of how pervasive our message is, would be measuring like number of jobs created, would be measuring, you know, new employment opportunities in town, or are you just saying that's up to us?
It's somewhat up to you with our guidance. Absolutely.
I think you'd have to identify what do you see as success. Is it full employment? Is it a certain number of jobs? Is it the fact that a certain percentage of people now view Waverly in a different manner, good, bad, and different? I think we will have to determine what do we see as success and how then would we measure that based on the input that Amperage would give us. You know, as we look at doing strategic planning in the summer and fall, one of the things that we brought up that would be very beneficial with this is that will give us great insight before we even start that process. You'll already have the groundwork laid down that Richard Fersman or someone like that would already be doing for us. Will be that much further ahead in the process. It may allow us to spend more time getting more detailed in our strategic plans or things that we want to venture off into instead of having that window where we have to do the exact same thing we're accomplishing here. So it will layer into the other very nicely and then into budget and as we flow through. So I think the whole process starting here is going to really benefit us in a very nice window of about 6 months or so that we will really see a huge stride and a great benefit from doing it. So once we figure out what we want to see, it's going to be very easy to measure that, and I think we'll have a lot of success. I think it's a good plan for us, economic development, very favorable. We've tried so many things and talked about doing so many other things, but we haven't done them. And I think it's probably time that we actually venture in and do some of these so we can at least have made the attempt.
And for me, I think the other thing that kind of ties this up real nice is just your work with the college and the hospital. We're not bringing a new person in that doesn't have a window into two very positive organizations in the community. So I see this as the third leg of the stool, and hopefully we can, the three entities will be able to get some leverage from each other based on how we package things up. And
they still have their Waverly passport. It's still good, and it's all ready to go.
Do you have any other small towns that you've worked with where you do have some measurable outcomes?
We have several measurable, my paper's slipping here, we have several measurable outcomes from the city of Mitchell, depending on what you're looking to measure. As far as overall brand perception, we haven't conducted that post-study yet, so I don't have the results on that. But we have implemented several other initiatives, like a workforce development initiative, that we would have measurable results on how many hits that site received, how many applications we've received. The same with, we did a workforce development initiative for the Creative Corridor, Cedar Rapids, Iowa City. That was a pure workforce development initiative looking to fill some of the same jobs that you're looking to fill here in Waverly. And we do have some measurable outcomes from that I can tell you right now. If you give me just a second to turn to that page in the in my document. Theirs was the Job Rush recruitment campaign is really what the messaging was behind it. And it drove almost 60,000 unique visitors to the landing page that was set up for this workforce development initiative. And it resulted in just over 4,000 job applicants, just this marketing campaign alone.
And that was compared to nothing before, or?
That was compared to nothing before. They hadn't had a direct workforce development initiative to help fill these jobs. They needed people. They needed people that they could wine and dine and convince to consider these job opportunities, and they were having a hard time getting the people. So we gave them the leads, so to speak.
And how long have you been working with Mitchell?
With Mitchell, 3 or 4 years. Without looking specifically at the piece of paper, it's right in that ballpark.
Okay, any other questions, comments? I think, as far as what happens to this, if it's approved and the documents are completed or close to completion, I think council's going to have to take ownership of that and make sure it doesn't just languish on the shelf collecting dust. And we'll have the primary investment in that, so we need to stay on top of it. Roll call vote, please.
Rafi?
Yes.
Scherer?
Yes.
Waldstein?
Yes.
Bergen?
Yes.
Rinkow?
Yes.
Kangas?
Yes.
McKenzie?
Yes.
Resolution 1859 is approved, 7-0. Item number 5, approving resolution 1860, approving the contract with Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa to establish a leisure services foundation and quasi-foundation.
I will move approval of Resolution 1860, approving a contract with Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa to establish a leisure services foundation and quasi-foundation with the donations of $10,000 each.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Tab, is this something that you need to enlighten us on?
It is. It's something that was new to me, and I've learned a lot about foundations. We've spoken to the Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa several times. We've had them at a commission meeting. The commission has reviewed this and talked about it. Basically, it's a establishment of 2 foundations with a minimum donation of $10,000 each to establish those 2 donations. However, Mayor, if you want to give $5 for the first donation, there's no limit on the initial donation. So rest assured, $5 is yours. But anyway, the idea was to establish a regular foundation that we would receive interest off of on an annual basis, but we would not be able to touch the principal. And a quasi-foundation, where I'll give you an excellent example right now. This foundation is more liquid. You'd be able to put money in and take money out, and you'd be still gaining interest. I have $43,000 of grant money right now that's waiting for a project for this fall, and I could have put that money in and have been gaining interest all this time until we actually needed to use it. So that's the difference between a quasi-foundation and a regular foundation. The hang-up, I think, on the regular foundation is that if people give us requests, bequests, donations, estates, those types of things, we can never touch the principal. And not to say we've never had issues with asking the council for project money. This might lighten that load a little bit over the years to get the interest money from that to do projects, or hopefully not ever use it for operations. So we're asking the council to approve the quasi and the regular foundation. And I think I mentioned in there, Decorah started theirs. A local bank donated like $50,000 right off the bat. And they're now in the 6 figures, and that's been the past year. And then there's indication that the Leisure Services Commission members will donate a significant number, at least to get one of the foundations started.
Okay, with a little background information now, I'd entertain a motion and second.
I already motioned it.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I'm the liaison to the leisure services, so we had a good conversation about this last time. It seems like a great venue for people to donate to the city. So if people want to give money to leisure services in some way, this basically gives them a place to donate their money to. And then we can basically use that interest to fund projects.
So is there something going on at Leisure Services that makes this a good idea right now? I'm just curious.
I don't think there's any particular plans for the money, but if we look at other communities that have these, there is no shortage of people who say, I want to donate $1,000 to the Park Service. I want to donate to the rail trail. I want to donate to this. And this gives them a place to donate that money. So,
I don't mean to interrupt. I actually brought this up to TAB last year because when my dad passed away, we were looking for a way to funnel contributions that people gave to the rail trail. And there wasn't really a solid fund. And so I had been talking to the foundation about setting up my own fund, which I did. And my grandpa had set up a fund that streams money toward the children's book section at the library. And so I just thought it was a great idea and mentioned it to TAB because the woman I spoke to was helping Decorah at that point. So I'm glad Leisure Services thought it was a good idea.
I guess just the mechanics, the drawing down of the funds would be by council action, by...
Are you talking about initial donations or whatever?
No, the money sitting there, it's...
How to spend.
We would get with the community foundation and they would give it to us once a year, 4 times a year, whatever we wanted to, and at that point we could decide what we wanted to do with it. If we wanted to just throw it in the general fund and offset some tax dollars, or if we wanted to put it toward a project.
But that would be council action to do.
Right, and I'm sure the Leisure Services Commission would have some input on it.
So realistically, how large would this fund have to be before you could get any significant return so that you could actually do something with the money?
$10,000.
$10,000.
It doesn't give you very much. It's based off the interest, what it earns.
But yeah, there has to be a minimum of $10,000 to establish such a thing.
You start it, yeah.
Each one of them.
But to be a meaningful amount, you'd really have to build that thing up for a while, would you not?
What would a meaningful amount be in your estimation?
Well, it all depends on what you think you want to do with the money
Depends on
you're
what you want to
earning.
buy.
If you only want to do things that cost $12.50, wouldn't take too much, but I know you guys do some things that are kind of pricey sometimes, would like to at least.
I know I'm on the library board foundation board, and we have 100,000 in that foundation, and we get 4% per year. So we get 4,000 a year, and that's what gets budgeted towards use for the library to use for projects.
Yeah.
And then you have the quasi fund, which is something where you can park things. So if you have a thing coming up, like if you have the South Riverside Park and you want to get people to donate to it, you can park that money there when you do that kind of a program to get people to give. And so if you have something to do, that's some place to put it and keep it before you spend it.
Yeah.
So both those funds are great ways to use that.
Well, to answer my own question, I'm guessing 6 figures would be good.
Yes.
If you want to start earning
Yep.
money that's going to make it a difference.
And the quasi-endowment, I think, makes all kinds of intuitive sense. And, I think the fundamental question is, because I don't think, except for the Library Foundation, we have any other endowment of any kind, let alone this kind. So I think the fundamental question is, do we want to create that kind of venue, for lack of a better term, for donations, or are there other ways to do donations when people want to donate something to the city? Because, it is true, you can never touch the principal. So whatever, goes into the endowment, yes, there's an incentive to increase it, of course, because 4% on $10,000 is different than 4% on $1 million. But it, it is untouchable.
Yeah, when we talked about that at the library board, it was like you had to be intentional about how you were going to do it. Were you going to do it, if you're recruiting for a certain thing, you don't want them putting it in the foundation if you really want to do a project next year. You know, you want that money to be given so that you can use that for the project. So it's a different, and as lawyers, we tend to find people that want to give endowments, and then there's other people that just want to give things to the entity they're giving to.
Well, I think the senior center has one. They have a fund through the Northeast Iowa Community Foundation, but you could either give a donation to the senior center or to the endowment or to the fund. I think as a donator, you get a tax credit for donating to the foundation, a 25% tax credit.
You can. If the funds
money.
are there and the legislature
Usually it gets
is talking
bumped to the
about
next
getting rid
year.
of that, but
Yeah. So theoretically, that's a perk.
And you still get a donation to the other thing because it's still going to the city, so you get
I
a
guess,
tax deduction.
How does this function differently than the accounts that we've had within the city finances? We had the account for the dog park, we had the account for band
Well,
show.
and the example is the $43,000 I have right now for a grant, or for grants for the Coleman Park surfacing project. It's just sitting there not getting any interest. Are we getting interest?
Not for that project.
Okay, see.
But those are each in the budget separately distinct items. How do we keep that track of that within a quasi-fund if there's
We'd have to have some accounting to it. I mean, we'd have to keep track of the principal that we've put in and figure out what the interest is on an annual basis if it was there for a while.
But this would be, had we had this 15 years ago, this is where the dog park funds could have gone into.
Certainly would have.
Band shell funds could have gone into it. And, okay.
Well, and I think the foundation does a fair amount of the administration work.
They do all the administration because
Yeah.
we pay them 1%
Pay
a
them
year.
a fee.
Mhm.
Well, except I just want to be clear. I mean, I think let's say the dog park example, that was just sitting in an account, and in the end, we could use all of that account. If it's put into the endowment, it cannot be used only 4% or whatever the earnings, are. That's all that can be drawn.
But the quasi account, you can
Yes.
put it in and pull
Yes,
it back
the
out.
quasi for sure.
So you have to be careful about which
Right.
one you put it in.
Yep.
So typically the funds that we're like rotating through, where it comes in and it goes out, we'll put it in the quasi. But if there's donations from community members where they want to go to the foundation, that would go to the foundation, so the money would stay there.
Can people donate to either, or they would donate just to the?
They can donate to either.
Either.
We still get a interest rate on the quasi.
I've got a couple of concerns about this tab. I like the concept. I think the concept is okay, but first of all, I'm really concerned about the 100 basis points annual fee. That seems really steep for the amount of services that we're getting for this, frankly. And secondly, they're paying us a return of 4%, which is considerably below the market, even on fairly conservative investments. So I'm assuming that the Community Foundation of Northeast Iowa has an investment manager that manages these funds, and I assume that they are getting returns significantly above 4%. So if they're getting a return of, say, 10 or 11%, what happens to that extra money? Does that go into the principal of our fund, or does the Community Foundation just keep that?
I believe it was a 4% minimum at this time, but that's adjusted every year. I believe they said they got 7% last year, 7 to 8% last year. So I think it's a conservative group. I don't actually know where the rest of the money goes.
So would we just be getting the 4%? I mean, a lot of times the way that these funds work is they're payout 4%. If they earn 7% or 8%, that additional amount simply gets added to the principal, so that increases the principal amount.
I don't know that.
Okay. Have you looked at all at any kind of alternatives to this, setting up our own foundation, or working with another foundation group? I'm really concerned about the fees on this, frankly.
I have not.
Okay.
I didn't think the 1% sounded too bad, but obviously I'm not an expert at this.
Yeah, I think before I could vote in favor of this, I mean, like I said, I'm in favor of the concept, no question, but I think a little more research needs to be done on what other alternatives there might be that would be available to us.
Okay.
I know the Northeast Iowa Foundation has like 600 agencies that they do a foundation for. So I don't know if there's other options out there.
I would certainly be willing to get more information before committing any funds to it ourselves. That may make some sense to just, I mean, there's not a rush to do it. It's a good idea. It's just a matter of, you know, how much more information.
I agree. And if this is the only option, well, then we can make that decision. But there are usually always other options.
It's been a while since I've been associated with Foundation in any direct way, but I think one of their strengths is that they can work with folks on the smaller dollar amounts. There are probably other organizations out there that want you to start with 6-7 figure, where this is a 10,000 minimum. So I'm not sure what other options may be out there at this face amount. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with them through the Library Foundation and some other entities in town that actually work through them as well for endowment dollars. And I mean, there's also I think there is also a community side to it in terms of that they're contributing, you know, to the community, the Cedar Valley and so on, or Northeast Iowa. So I'm in general, I don't want to sound like I'm opposed to it, but I do wonder too if we couldn't just get a few more questions answered. I think the question about what if the interest rate changes and, you know, where does that additional, in a given year, where does that additional money go? Does it go to the principal? Does it go back to the foundation? Does our drawdown change? Just understanding that a bit better, and potentially, whether there are any other alternatives to doing something similar so that we're just sure about the decision. I guess as long as there's no urgency, I'd be in favor of that as well.
Well, I wonder if, I don't know if Elizabeth or somebody from the foundation could come. Mm-hmm. You know, this isn't really city money per se, unless it's going to be sitting in a fund, but it would mainly be donated money, at least for the endowment part. But maybe she could come and give more information, or.
And I think, you know, part of the, at least because I've given through it too to other places, but you know, part of the attraction are the tax credits, like you mentioned, Ann. But you know, those are a little bit on shaky ground right now. So, you know, whether that'll be an incentive much longer, you know, is questionable. It might be, but we just don't know. And so I guess I don't fully understand. Okay, if somebody wants to give, you know, like you know, your family wanted to give to the city, why, you know, why wouldn't we explore, you know, some variety of ways to do that? I mean, and maybe this is the best option.
We had specific accounts for things like the dog park or the trail and that sort of thing, but they weren't interest drawing or anything like that. So they just basically, the funds just sat there.
Yeah. Did they have to, and they had to be that way, or?
I don't know. I'd talk to the finance experts about any limitations on investments that cities can do, and I believe that there's some real limits on that.
Oh, okay.
When you put that into a city account, I mean, Jennifer, what their interest at times, 0.25%, 0.5%, you're not able to generate anything because the limitations where we can invest as a government, we are very limited and have to be extremely safe, whether it be governmental securities, IP, things like that. We'll never generate anywhere near what a more private enterprise could. So that's where the attraction really sits, is you benefit more by what you can generate in interest, where we have to play it so safe, we're really lessened in our abilities.
They can help you with marketing and different things.
Hey, any other questions, comments? Roll call vote, please.
Are we looking to table this?
Did we already have a motion and a second? I'm sorry.
We already had a motion and a second. So the question is, do we want to table it to get more information?
Sounds to me like that's what you're.
Can we do that after a motion and a second? I'm not sure.
Yeah, you can table it.
Okay. Okay.
Then you just have to table and the motion still stands.
Or you can vote and defeat it and let them bring it back.
Well, I would move to, how much time do you think you need to have to get more information?
Give me a month.
Okay, so what meeting would that be? Can somebody help me with that?
May 7th.
May 7th meeting?
The 7th?
You gave the fair a month. Give me a month.
Okay, so I would move to, I guess I will say postpone, I think is better, this decision until May 7th, and we don't have to table it and untable it.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion made and seconded to postpone action on Resolution 1860 until May 7th.
Voice, yeah, that could just be
Yeah.
voice.
Any discussion? All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Opposed? Resolution 1860 is postponed by a 7-0 vote. Item number 6, approving Resolution 1861, approving the Leisure Services Department fees and charges for 2018. Entertain a motion, please.
I'll move the resolution as read by the mayor.
Second.
Motion to approve Leisure Services Department fees and charges for 2018. Made and seconded. Any discussion by council? Anyone here that?
We're mixing them up, aren't we? We talking about the intercog?
Did we jump ahead 1 2 minutes?
No,
Item number 6.
Oh, number 6. Okay, I'm sorry.
Number 6.
Sorry,
Yes.
sorry.
Anyone here to speak to any of those fees?
Just that, honestly, I'm a little late this year because usually the golf course is open by now, but the weather's been so crappy, it doesn't make any difference. These are the fees and charges, especially on the youth side for the golf course. We want to establish some younger adult fees. We want to reestablish the college fee. We want to make all the youth the same price instead of having a team fee and a youth fee. And we want to increase the age range for the young adult. So that's hopefully we'll get some younger golfers at the golf course. On the cemetery side, we just want to increase the fees for Saturday services. We're getting more and more of those. It costs us more money to do those. So we thought just offset some of our costs.
Okay.
So is Carla permitted to put the word crappy into the minutes?
I was not going to.
Just checking.
Tab, I had a question about the college season pass for the golf.
Sure.
Is that just if they golf before Memorial Day and
after Labor Day?
Is that like for Wartburg students, you mean, or
Correct, or UNI students or anybody like that, yes.
what do they pay in the summer? They pay the
It'd be the young adult,
fee?
yes.
Okay.
What did the upper age limit for the young adult, what was that previously?
23.
23, okay.
I know Jordan David has been doing some commercials on K-Way with this information, and he does a good job of pushing it, so hopefully you'll see some good results from it.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Roll call vote, please.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Bergen.
Yes.
Drinkow.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Rafi.
Yes.
Chair.
Yes.
Resolution 1861 approved 7-0. Item number 7, approving Resolution 1862, authorizing the mayor to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Iowa Northland Regional Council of Governments, known as INTERCOG, for the general administration of the housing fund contract with the Iowa Economic Development Authority. Entertain a motion and a second.
I'll move Resolution 1862, authorizing the mayor to sign a memorandum of understanding with INTERCOG for the general administration of the housing fund contract with the Iowa Economic Development Authority.
Second.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Council discussion. Bill, would you enlighten us?
Sure. This is our program to try to find 6 homeowners to improve their homes for the loan of $24,999. So we had to pick an area that would have about 70, I think we ended up with 74 homes. And so we couldn't do a broader, like all of our central core that used to be in the flood zone, because that was too many. So we're starting on the northwest end, from the railroad down to 3rd, and then from 6th Street over to the river. And there's 74 houses there. So if you live in that, and I'm talking to the public, if you live in that area, you need to be returning your surveys and returning your application form so that we can get people that would apply for this type of grant. What you're doing today is authorizing Intercog to continue with administration of this grant if we get that grant in order to move forward. But we've already moved forward with sending out letters and application forms and survey for those people in that area. Even if they don't intend to apply for it, if they send the survey back, it will help us qualify the area to get the grant. So it's really kind of a chicken and egg thing. We have to show that we have enough people to qualify, and then we have to have people who want to apply for it.
This is a competitive grant, so it's real important that we have folks return those surveys to even have a chance of getting the money, and then there'll be a second round of deciding.
Right. And what we intend to do is hopefully in the next 2 years, we do 2 more. We do maybe a middle and then maybe a southwest, and we want to just hit those areas so that we can give that opportunity to those people that their homes are out of the floodplain now, and they could use $25,000 to fix up their homes. So this is just that contract to work with Intercog.
These are forgivable loan type grants?
It is a forgivable 5-year loan.
So if they stay in the home for 5 years?
The loan goes away, and they get to keep the siding and the roof and the windows or whatever they put on.
So little to no out-of-pocket for the homeowner.
And there's some paperwork involved, so people have to be prepared. And that Intercog will bring them through this process. But it's usually a wonderful thing for people to be able to get $25,000 for homes that need those kinds of things, windows and energy efficiency things, roofs, things that'll make those livable.
I think the last time the city did this, it was out in the Eastgate development. There were a few.
Could be right. I didn't have anything to do with that. But we usually pick an area, and it's a competitive grant. We thought we had a pretty good chance to start using this because of the floodplain. That would have dampened people putting money into their homes. So we thought this is a good time now that their houses are out of that 100-year floodplain, that they could take advantage of this type of loan to kickstart fixing up their homes.
I think it's a great opportunity. I'd certainly encourage people to take advantage of it.
And our payment to Intercog, is that budgeted?
Actually, it comes out of the grant.
Oh, it comes out of the grant, okay.
Okay. Any further questions, discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Bergen.
Yes.
Drinkow.
Yes.
Kangas.
Yes.
McKenzie.
Yes.
Rothy.
Yes.
Shara.
Yes.
Waldstein.
Yes.
Resolution 1862 is carried 7-0. Item number 8, Resolution 1863, has been pulled from the agenda. So we'll move on to reports from boards and commission. Historic Preservation Commission minutes. Any comments? Otherwise received into record. Staff comments.
I guess we do.
Well, I mentioned it this morning, but if there's anyone still tuning in tonight, we celebrated the rescheduled grand opening of the city's yard waste site today. Just in time for, I think, about 4 inches of snow that'll occur tomorrow, and forecasted 3 to 5 inches for Sunday. So we still are open for business if you have something to.
So I have 2 days to get my Christmas tree out there.
We'll take it.
Oh, my goodness.
It's been a bird sanctuary for a couple months.
Yes, sir, Deb.
Just an FYI, we're scheduled to have the dog Easter egg hunt next Sunday. We'll see what happens, but there'll be 1,700 Easter eggs out there for dogs to collect.
They're colored, but I don't think the dogs can see them because they're colorblind, so it might be a little difficult.
They have a dog treated in them, they can smell them.
Throw them in the snow.
When are you filling those? Didn't you need volunteers?
Tomorrow night, here. And we need, at 6 PM, if you want to come and help us fill them, that'd be great. You kind of smell like a piece of dog food afterwards.
So are you going to? I'm the MC.
MC.
Yes, I will be the MC, and they're going to be hidden like
in the grass.
Under the snow, perhaps. We'll see. Okay.
Might be more like trick or treating if it snows that heavy. We'll just.
Is Brian going to be wearing a bow wow tie?
So what is the?
You know, there's always that moment, isn't there? Just is.
I think we've crossed the line.
Look at the time.
What is the MC for this event actually get to do? I'm just curious.
I believe I read the instructions and I say, "Go get them."
Do you wear a costume?
No barking?
No barking costume?
No barking costume. Yeah. I think you're barking up the wrong tree.
Oh, it's so late.
Sorry. I'm sorry I brought it up.
Yeah, move on to the dogs.
Any other staff comments?
So I can bring it down to earth from this jovial thought and thinking about the fact that Bremer Avenue construction could start this week or not. I talked to Ryan Delaney standing on Bremer Avenue tonight at about 4 o'clock, and he said, well, we're still planning on looking and seeing if we can do it, setting up traffic control tomorrow. If there's significant snow, they probably may not do it. I think they're supposed to be out putting up no parking signs on Bremer right now. They took off a couple of partitions or pieces of the canopy today. They slid right out nicely. So they'll be keeping that job going, I think, no matter what, even in the snow, because I think he wants to get that down this week. So if it goes up, just keep in mind, you just watch the signs and follow the road.
I think that's it. We only got a few left. Rich, Jennifer,
I'm good.
I think we're good, sir.
Okay, very good.
Doesn't have any canine up there?
I don't think so.
Police canine going to get to do the?
I don't think so.
It's really not fair. I mean, the canine dogs at Drugs Never,
I know.
it's probably not fair.
I just wondered if he gets to play.
You were talking about Easter egg hunts for I believe it was the Cedar Rapids Fire Department held a Easter egg hunt for blind children. Over the weekend, they took oversized eggs and put sound beepers in them, and there were.
James, the canine, he wouldn't even eat the treats. He would just sit next to them.
That's true.
Say, like,
He'd identify
this
it.
is how I found them. So some other puppy can come along and have the treats.
Well, if he starts tapping that egg, we got a bigger problem.
Okay, council comments, anyone?
Just a question. I've had a few folks comment on the constant pounding coming out of southeast. I assume they're driving pylons for the pier. Do we have any window into how long that's going to continue?
It takes a little bit of time.
They're working on the first one or the second? Just the first one?
I'm not sure which one.
They're not past the first or second one, and they have 5 to do. So.
Okay.
It's going to take a while.
Sounds of progress.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments?
So I was at the most recent Historic Preservation Commission, and we discussed our recent decision to fill the crypt at Harlington with concrete. And one of the questions that was raised is, have we taken photographs of the inside before we fill it with concrete?
Yeah, we've got lots of photographs.
Okay.
Anything else? Mayor has no comments other than thank you, Eric, for your attendance, and we'll look
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would say, I think that I've had the squeakiest chair all night. You guys, he's leaning back really comfortable and nothing squeaks, and every time I move, I get really nervous in this chair.
Oh, have maintenance take a look at it.
It's just a coincidence, I'm sure.
I think that was designed to keep our visiting council person awake and alert.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second? Second. Motion made and seconded. All those in favor say yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Adjourned we are.